Ladies and gentlemen, MrCropper here. This is Cultured Thug. Let me introduce you to him a little bit. His channel keeps getting removed from YouTube, so you can't find him on YouTube anymore, but here's a mirror put up by Fascist Maxims.
I don't think any of my videos could ever be called hateful. I think we just break down books and we go into there. And a lot of my books on the Jewish question are written by Jews themselves. And I'm quoting Jews themselves on the Jewish question. So, I make sure to try to give it not so much an intellectual, but a learned perspective on these questions, on third position, on the Jewish question, on anything else we deal with on the culture.
Alright, so he's pretty educated on the Jewish question, but he mistakes bad philosophy for malevolence. But we're not too worried about this particular video. I just wanted to introduce you to him. We are worried about this video, the capitalist mind on automation. Now he's chosen a pretty poor opponent, which is Stefan Molyneux, who is just so-so on these things. So let's go ahead and see what goes on here.
The capitalist truly has a perverse way of thinking. A lot of that perverseness could be seen in this quick little 10-minute video done by capitalist Stefan Molyneux. Let's take a look at what he's talking about and see the mindset of the capitalist and why it should be such a repugnant thing to even consider yourself a capitalist, let alone take pride in it.
Hey everybody, Stefan Molyneux from Freedom Made Radio. Hope you're doing well. Time for your daily argument. Today, my friends, we are dipping into the highly dangerous intergalactic realm of killer automation robots that eat the unemployed and crap the poor. Yes, we're talking about the myth that automation creates unemployment.
Now, that's no myth. I mean, that is an actuality.
Wrong. It is not an actuality. It is a myth. What does happen is automation makes everybody in society more productive. And you can take farms as an example. It makes the societies becoming more sophisticated as it advances. And so a farmer from 100 years ago did not need to know the things about tools and machinery and electronics that a farmer today needs to know. And in fact, a farmer in 2019 who isn't aware of the internet is really, really lacking. I mean, he's lacking tools, he's lacking know-how, he's lacking new information. Farmers today use internet connections when they are leveling their fields, and they are definitely more educated and require more information and more education than farmers 100 years ago. So what's happened is farmers went from 60 or 70% of the population 100 years ago to 3% of the population today in the United States. And what happened during that time was farming became more sophisticated, and some farmers kept up with the sophistication. Other farmers did not. They had to go out of business. The farmers who kept up with the sophistication are still in business, and that means that a lot of small farms, which are uneconomical, go out of business, and big corporate farms take their place. That's definitely happened, and it makes food cheaper and more readily available and abundant. In the meantime, what happened to our economy? We went from 100 million people back then to 350 million people now. Are you saying we have less jobs because we've automated farming? So automation actually makes more jobs. It just raises the technical level of everybody. Part of the conversation today is, can we really take these people with low technical skills and retrain them for the jobs that are needed? That's part of the rub today. But it definitely increases the amount of jobs.
Once your job becomes automized, you lose that job. So you'll, of course, have to start the process of finding another job. But while you're in that process, you're unemployed. Therefore, the automation has made you unemployed. And he even understands this because he goes on to contradict that statement not even 2 minutes down the road.
Frederick Bastiat talks about this in The Seen versus the Unseen. And what you can see is some worker who just lost his job. What you cannot see is the thousands and thousands of dollars that will be added to the economy this year because of that. And that worker can go somewhere else and get another job doing something that's still needed and continue to contribute to the economy. Meanwhile, this menial job, which can apparently be automated, has now been automated. It sets workers free. And the point about wants and needs, human wants and needs, is that they are infinite, aren't they? So there will always be some want out there for this person to go satisfy or try to satisfy. It's not like there's a limited pool of wants. So just because this one job has been automated out of existence into a robot doesn't mean that there aren't other wants and needs humans have that this person can go and of course, one of the problems is the controls on our economy. If you automate somebody's job out of existence and then don't allow them to get another job legally, that's a problem. But the automation itself isn't the problem there, it's the government restrictions.
Some demand from the one guy or the couple of guys who've been thrown out of nail jobs or whatever, but
let's continue on to his nail analogy so you can see what he's referencing here with the nail makers losing their job.
So here's how the standard myth goes. You have some medieval worker who takes a whole day to produce 10 nails. Then some jerkazoid capitalist monocle-wearing monopoly man comes along with some machine that produces, with just about the same amount of time, 1,000 nails. So you have 990 nails the way you didn't have them before. Because you have 100 times more nails than you had in the past, 999 out of 1,000 nail makers is unemployed. They have to run through the ditches eating dandelions and preying upon squirrels for their sustenance. And because they're unemployed, they're no longer making money.
So he contradicts his opening statement of automation does not cause unemployment when he just says himself, 99% of the nail makers are put out of work by the automation.
Lame. He's going to go on to prove that the nail workers have other stuff to do or something. Lame.
And then he goes on to kind of ridicule their unemployment. They have to run through ditches, kind of mocking it, making fun. Oh, woe is them. You know, now they're going to starve. Well, in reality, yeah, if you're living paycheck to paycheck like most working class people are doing, searching for that job.
Wow, this is a lame straw man. Way to really approach Stefan's argument there. Straw man it and then go into the straw man in detail. Real good.
However long it takes to find another job that you can fit into with your skills, which if you're working a warehouse job or a nail making job, obviously you're only going to be available for certain jobs.
Now that returns to my previous point that in a free economy, we're going to continue to get more and more sophisticated. We're not going to stay at a low level. And a farmer who farms today had better be very sophisticated and he better know something about the internet and electronics. And a farmer in the 1950s had to know something about checking the oil in his tractor. Whereas a farmer in the 1890s didn't need to know about checking the oil in his tractor, did he? So here in the 1950s, these farmers are going around with this fancy hootin' tootin' stuff, starting these tractors up with batteries, and some tractors are so big that they have a small engine. You have to start the small engine, and that's used as a starter for the bigger engine. And now you have to know about engines and pistons and rings and gaskets and oil pumps and bearings. You didn't need to know any of that stuff in 1890. So a farmer in the 1950s was mechanically sophisticated beyond belief compared to an 1890 farmer. And of course a farmer in 2019 knows how to go on the internet and check livestock futures and determine whether or not to take some cows to the market this week. Or he knows how to check for the price of water going up, or to look at trends for water and see whether water is going to be more available this year or not, or all kinds of things. Or to work on his vehicles, he needs to know all kinds of stuff and has to have all kinds of sophisticated equipment to be able to use it. Everything gets more sophisticated, even the most mundane job of farming. But everything gets more sophisticated, more and more and more sophisticated. That's what happens in a free economy.
While you're going through that period, yes, it's going to be tough. It's going to be moments of struggle, especially if you have a family to feed as well. This is at the root. This is why I find libertarianism and capitalism, these beliefs in it, these ideologies, so disgusting, because they're so self-centered. And this guy, even though
Is it self-centered to want to live in the United States as opposed to Soviet Russia? Because that's the other option. Either we just have a whole bunch of people making nails, or we have one guy making nails so that the other people can get on to doing something more productive. And you're missing the point of what happens to those nail makers. They actually go out and get jobs and do something more productive than they had been doing before, due to the sophistication in the economy. They go out and they say, well, all right, can't make nails anymore, I'll have to do, and you fill in the blank for what they'll have to do. You just decide for yourself, and then go look at that industry and see the tools that are being used and the techniques that are being used and the knowledge that is being brought to bear on that industry. And of course, the real salient point about capitalism, the salient and important point about capitalism is the use of reason and the mind. People are able to use their mind to figure out a newer, better way to do something, and then they implement that, and everybody else has to follow suit or go broke. That's the beautiful thing about it. Like, look at the fact that you used to could drill an oil well. No problem. The oil starts coming up. When it goes dry, you move on. But a sophisticated behavior came into being, and they started putting explosives down the oil wells, and then they started drilling down and drilling sideways, and drilling out sideways from the oil well. Dozens of holes from one well, and getting huge amounts of rock surface exposure compared to what they used to. And then they go down and explode that rock. That's called fracking. Now that's a much, much more sophisticated, difficult, long-term, expensive, highly technical process than just drilling one hole straight down into the ground, poking a pipe into it, and there you go, there's your oil well. So even drilling oil wells has become more technological and sophisticated. Everything in a free economy becomes more technological and sophisticated over time because we apply reason and science to it. Now your only option is to stand against that and say no reason and science here. We're just going to keep on using whatever tools we were given by our fathers. So you're a communist or you're a fascist. You're against progress. You're in favor of poverty.
Good content out there, right? Even though, I don't want to personally attack, but this is the mentality that even in what he thinks sounds completely normal and rational is disgusting. And he's mocking and using these little tricks, and that we'll get into as he continues on speaking, to try to ridicule anyone with a thought process that goes against his beloved free market and his beloved capitalism.
Now, if he were right, then his judgments there would be right. But he's wrong. The United States automates everything. We automate and automate and automate, and we have more jobs and more wealth than anybody in the world. Now, can't you see that goes together? When you have robots doing things and the people are overdoing other stuff, the robots are sitting there making wealth that used to be made by people, and the people are free to do other stuff. I mean, one of the things that leads to is that we work less for the same amount of wealth, or we can get more wealth if we work more. So what you have is you have poor people sitting around watching TV, drinking beer. Now, a poor person couldn't watch TV and drink beer 100 years ago. They couldn't afford the beer, and there was no TV. So automation in our society leads to progress all around for everybody. It leads to a better, more sophisticated society, even for the poor people. A poor person who goes to, some place and gets a job has all kinds of tools put in their hands, computers and machines and different things. Very poor people have very big, expensive tools put in their hands so they can do their jobs. That's the way we are in a sophisticated society, in a cultured society.
Because as he downplays the struggle of the working class, and never mind, the working class is already fighting illegal workers. They already have to deal with that. They already have to deal with a union that has more political interest than actual interest of workers. And now they're dealing with the threat of automation. And this is something to be mocked by the capitalists.
Unions did cause huge problems in the United States in the 1900s. And we had a very, very bad situation where the president said, He was always on the side of the unions whenever there was a disagreement between unions and companies. And that led to huge, huge runaway expenses for companies, and it destroyed a lot of companies, absolutely destroyed them. Railroads, automobiles, steel, and others.
Oh, their struggle while they're looking for work, while they're put out of jobs by these robots, by automation, by these computers. Oh, it's them running through ditches, eating dandelions, chasing squirrels. No, it's real struggle. It's real struggle when you lose your job. It's real struggle when you're living paycheck to paycheck. And you're put out of your job, especially when you're put out of your job by a goddamn machine. It's nothing to mock. This is the perverse capitalist mindset here.
All right. Do you know that in Kenya you can hire a guy to haul your lumber to your building site for $10, but it'll take him 2 or 3 days? Or you can hire a truck to do it for $20, and they'll have it done in a couple of hours. So what's valuable to you, time or money? Do you have 3 days to get the lumber there? No, you don't have 3 days to get the lumber there. Unless you do, then you pay the guy $10 and he brings it a few boards at a time on his head. Otherwise, you hire a truck and they load it on, bring it over, and unload it. So that guy who was carrying boards on his head is now unemployed because these people have a truck. So a truck has put him out of work. So is that the camp you're in? You want to do away with automobiles so we'll have more work for people who want to carry stuff on their heads?
It's very, at its root, it's me. And that is probably the most disgusting aspect of it. And it's on full display in this video. Like it's on full display in numerous videos put forth by libertarians, individualists, and capitalists.
See, because
Well, at least he's got the groups, right? Libertarians, individualists, capos. He knows who's trying to defend this stuff, even if they're not all defending it properly. Stefbot here's an idiot. He's an anarchist of some flavor. But at least the guy knows who his enemies are.
longer making money. Their demand for goods and services collapses. And that means because there's less demand, more people are thrown out of work because they've no one to sell to, and then you get this vicious Death Star snowballing that wipes out civilization just because of 100 times next. So
once again, notice how he sets up this false premise that automation is going to lead to the complete destruction of the world. No one I've run across, I've read 2 specific works on the automation problem, Race Against the Machine and Rise of the Robots. And in neither of those works, and in neither of any of the videos I've seen on this topic, has anyone made the claim that automation is going to destroy the whole world. Of course, there's people who like to pontificate on theories of the Terminator scenario where artificial intelligence may, if it comes to consciousness, may realize, it's superior to humans and what does it need humans for, and then you have the whole Terminator scenario going on. But that's, I guess, science fiction or science future theorizing. That's completely different than what he's talking about with automation. So they take these examples and push them all the way to their extreme because they're easier to attack like that. His idol, Stefan's idol, Ayn Rand, was notorious for that. She did that in numerous of her works. She would take the most extreme, fantastical examples of oppressive collectivism as she could, and she would present that as what collectivism itself was. And then it's much easier to attack it. So this is what he's doing right here.
Well, whatever flavor you have collectivism in, it tends to be a disaster, right? Soviet Russia, Nazi Germany, China, and in the modern world, Cuba, Venezuela, North Korea. I mean, it doesn't seem like there's a good flavor that you can practice it under. But what about Hong Kong? Machines and automation everywhere. They are better off, right? They're richer. What about South versus North Korea? North Korea doesn't have any machines to take people's jobs away. South Korea does. They ought to be highly unemployed in South Korea. Japan's the most automated society in the world. They've got robots to make beds and fold laundry in Japan. They ought to have no jobs at all. Is that the case? Of course that's not the case. They need the robots to do work so that humans can get on with other stuff. Now, if you would look around, you would find yourself sitting here doing less work than your great-grandpa had to do, just so that he could afford some chicken and a bottle of whiskey. You have to do half as much work as him, and not even in half as difficult a conditions as him, And what do you have? An internet connection and a computer, and you're fat. That's what you have. And you do a lot less work than your great-grandpa. And the reason that you're so rich is because of the sophistication of our economy, the automation, the tools, the science, the reason, and the thinking that has gone into it. And that's what all these individualists are all about, is the fact that the only way anybody can think is by using their own mind and thinking for themselves. So the root of all of this prosperity comes from individualism.
This false narrative, oh, these people worried about automation, these people who are saying we should discuss how far we go with automation, they're loonies. They think, machines are going to run and kill the world just because they can make nails more proficiently. It's a cheap tactic. This is intellectual dishonesty. When he creates false narratives and tries to prove.
I kind of wanted to hear what Steph said after that, but I can see why you don't want him to say anything after that, because you're straw manning him and just going on and on about a straw man like a pathetic lout.
Point by attacking these created, overtly exaggerated examples that he puts out there.
That's kind of how it works in theory. That's not how it works in practice, even remotely. So let me sort of break it down for you. I can't believe things people say. I swear to God, the free market is like an IQ test. It's all it is. All it is.
You catch that? The free market's an IQ test. If you don't believe in a free market, you're dumb. You have a low IQ. Once again, he's trying to set the argument to his advantage by creating these false premises.
The free market is an IQ test because it's sophisticated. And more intelligent people will do better in a more sophisticated system. So you do well to educate yourself in a free market so that you can do a better job of benefiting those around you so that you can get money from them. That's how you get money in a free market, is you benefit other people. You do something for them, and that gets money for you. So you have to make sure that you can benefit them greatly, not just smallly. If you can only make a small benefit for them, you'll get small money. If you can make big benefit for people, you get big money from them. That's a free economy. If you have a tool, then you can make much benefit for people. If you have to haul boards around on your head, you can only benefit a little. If you can haul boards in a truck, you can benefit much. Therefore, the tools you have help you automate and make more benefit to people. And if people are benefited, then they are able to afford to make more things. If the person building house can make house cheaper, they make more house because they don't have to pay man to haul board on head.
In a free market is high IQ. Rejection of free market is low IQ. Hell, it could be even considered the other way, especially in modernity. I'd say the blind acceptance of a unregulated, unrestricted, completely free market with how human nature is, especially with how mass thought is, as well pointed out by Gustave Le Bon in his book The Crowd, also well pointed out by Edward Bernays in his work Propaganda, or Jacques Ellul in his work Propaganda. There's even a good BBC documentary entitled The Century of the Self.
Good BBC documentary is a contradiction in terms, and I've watched that documentary, and it's a bunch of Marxist drivel. Now, if you wanted to know what an unfettered free market would look like, go to Hong Kong.
100 years ago, a new theory about human nature was put forward by Sigmund Freud. He had discovered, he said, primitive sexual and aggressive forces hidden deep inside the minds of all human beings. Forces which, if not controlled, led individuals and societies to chaos and destruction. This series is about how those in power have used Freud's theories to try and control the dangerous crowd in an age of mass democracy.
Sorry, this BBC nonsense. I hope he doesn't go on too long with it because I'm probably not allowed to put that on. Alright, he's back. Probably not allowed to have that on YouTube.
Supply and demand in his head, everything's on paper. There's no human element to it at all. It's simply about, can I get things cheaper? Will it benefit me better?
Because you're paying less for nails, so you can charge less. Now, when the price of everything goes down, whereas you used to spend $100 for a table, now maybe you're only spending $95 for a table, or 98, or 97, or 90, or whatever. That extra money, you then go and spend somewhere else. Or even if you stick it in the bank then takes it and lends it out to entrepreneurs who are creating jobs.
But the nail example is just one type of example. I can think also of rails that they used for railroads. Machines came out that, they had learned how to make rails, and they had learned what kinds of rails were best. In fact, when they started out, they just had wooden beams with a strip of metal on top of them, and they ran trains on these wooden beams with a strip of metal on top. But as metal became cheaper, they were able to make the entire rail out of metal, and then as metal became even cheaper, they were able to make bigger, heavier, thicker rails, and then steel came into existence. And steel was much cheaper to make in very large amounts, and they were able to completely revolutionize rails, and some of the dangers of rails travel disappeared. It used to be that rails would shatter, these cast iron rails would shatter and would poke up through the bottom of rail carriages at high speeds as you're going down, 20, 30 miles an hour down the railroad line, and all of a sudden a rail comes up through the floor and impales people. And that happened. So steel rails saved the money of those carriages, which were no longer being destroyed needlessly, made trains go faster, cost less money because you don't have to replace them as often, didn't break as much, saved on trains and locomotives and people. The people who were good at running these trains got killed, more often, and so progress leads to saving on skills of people and building up skills faster in your workforce. There's lots and lots of good that comes from the progress. And this guy's idea is what? To stay with cast iron rails?
You see how this works? See why I call it a bit of an IQ test?
Oh, it's a bit of an IQ test. If you don't think banks are righteous little job creators in our society, you must be dumb. You must have a low IQ. You see how it works? Yeah, because banks are great. They're job creators. You put more money into the bank, and they loan your money for someone else, and they make profit off of it. And they usually loan it to people on bad deals so they can buy shitty houses that they can't even afford in the first place.
That was a government regulation based on racism. The government went to the mortgage loan companies and said, this is very odd that 85 or 90% of your mortgages go to white people, whereas only 70% of the country is white. Why are you lending so often to white people? You need to lend more to blacks and Hispanics. And the companies went out and did as they were legally told to do, and then they sold those mortgages on to other people. Do you know why they sold them? Because they knew damn well those mortgages would not be paid on. And so they sold them sometimes to people overseas, because the people overseas didn't realize how bad of a deal it was. The people overseas got this stuff called high leverage debt that sounds like you're putting a heavy long lever under something, right? A lot of them did not know what they were buying, and they thought it came at great interest rates and increased payments over time, and it looked like it was going to be great. But the problem is, just go 5 years down the road and see if any of those mortgages are being paid on, and they're not. They were only lent to because the government demanded that people with dark skin get houses. So it caused a housing boom, because all of a sudden the demand for houses went through the roof, because people who used to couldn't get a house, now they can get a house. And the mortgage companies had to come up with bizarre ways of doing this, like liar applications, where you would tell them what your income was, and they would base their decision to loan to you based on your statement of your income. And they wouldn't investigate to see if your income was true. They would let that be up to you. That's your problem. Then they would sell you the house based on your statement of your income, and then they would sell the mortgage on to somebody else and let that company worry about collecting from these people who everybody knew wasn't going to collect, except the person who bought the mortgage at the end. So that was government interference right there, in the name of racial equality of some kind or something like that.
And notice, still, there's no discussion on the human element. There's no discussion on the people that are out of work that now have to find new work. Everything, the first priority in his mindset is things are cheaper now. That's
Yeah, we don't sit around making guitars by hand anymore, but you can certainly buy a guitar. And we don't sit around making jewelry by hand anymore, but you can certainly buy a lot of jewelry. Actually, people do make jewelry by hand. That's a bad example because it's so expensive. But we don't make plate glass by hand anymore like they did in the 1800s. We now have much cheaper, better plate glass. So that's what happens when you automate, is you make more goods available for more people cheaper, and it increases the standard of living of everybody. Now, if this guy were right, then producing more automobiles would be a bad thing because it would put some automobile workers out of jobs. So it's better to produce less automobiles to make sure the automobile workers have jobs. But the problem is people need those automobiles to make other jobs. If people have cheap automobiles, then they can make jobs or they can get to a job. Some guy's trying to hire people, but he doesn't have enough workers in the area. If only they had cheap cars available, he could get workers from all over the county. So the problem is that we need the cars, and this guy wants to stop us from making more cars, or even stop cars from being manufactured so people could. What about the horse and buggy drivers that are all out of work now, and the guys that used to make saddles, and the guys that used to make horse whips out of braided leather? All those guys are out of work. And the buggy whip company and the companies that made buggies, horse-drawn buggies, they were all based up in Detroit. They're all gone. They're all gone. All the jobs that went with them, all those factories, all the lumber felling operations to bring the wood in to make the carriages out of, all those jobs are gone. Destroyed.
completely materialistic.
So when the price of goods goes down because some source material is cheaper, people have more money to spend on other things, which drives up demand for those other things which otherwise wouldn't really be there. So yes, it's true. You've lost some demand from the one guy or the couple of guys who've been thrown out of nail jobs or whatever, but it's more than made up for it.
Very nice. When we save money on whatever it is, like the railroad company now, it doesn't have to replace its rails as often, and it's saving money on engineers and stuff who aren't dying as much, and passengers are more willing to buy tickets now, so the demand for tickets goes up because it's not as dangerous to travel on the rail. So it saves the railroad all around. So what does the railroad do with that extra money? It either opens up a new branch line to a town that didn't have it before, or it buys new locomotives from the locomotive company, so it makes jobs over there, or it buys new carriages, or it improves its stations, or maybe it just gives its CEO a raise, and he takes his money and he builds a mansion which employs a bunch of workers, and he employs an army of gardeners to take care of his roses, and he puts the rest of the money in the bank, and then the bank has millions of dollars sitting in it, so it loans money out to poor people who want to, buy this or that or the other. A radio, a vacuum cleaner, a house. So it just helps everybody everywhere, and this lacks the human element. Well, North Korea's got your human element, buddy.
Everyone else. Now,
So the explanation is, okay, this guy's out of work now, this nail maker, but now, since you can use nails to make furniture, etc., more furniture is being made because it's cheaper now to buy nails, and now there's going to be this great influx of people buying furniture now because it's $5 off. It was the example he gave. So it's going to create this tsunami of furniture buyers that's going to create all this growth.
No, the nails wasn't an example of that, but maybe the personal computer is, right? That was not just making something cheaper, not making it 5% cheaper, but inventing a whole new thing. Same with automobiles. Automobiles were not just making the horse and buggy 5% cheaper. It invented a whole new thing. So you can straw man his position if you want, but it doesn't make your position look very good.
Street. But when you look at the chart of the national GDP versus median household income, we see who makes the money off automation. The working class, it's not working class people that benefit from this. And on top of that,
I don't know how they measure that our income has gone down. So we're poorer than we used to be. May be the case. Might be the case. It seems like a lot of stuff costs just about the same that it did 20 years ago. A lot of stuff has doubled in price. Wages haven't gone up that much. I don't know if it's gone down that sharp. This stuff up here is definitely the the controlled economy we have in the United States, the rich upper class holding and keeping control and getting more and more control using government power. That is for sure. They're taxing us and handing it to themselves through corporate welfare and government spending. When the government spends, it spends at our corporations. It buys things from our corporations, be it health care or housing or building a freeway or a bridge or whatever. So all the money that it spends goes into our corporations, some of which are foreign owned, I'm sure. So these two plots are a little bit distressing. You're not going to do anything about that by doing away with automation, though. Holy crap.
Now the nail maker, his job is automated. Now you say, oh, the furniture industry picks up. Oh, what if a large part of the furniture industry has become automated now? And then now what? What do you do when everything, especially at a level where you're working with your hands, is becoming automated?
I'll tell you what we do. We spend more time sitting around reading books or painting or watching YouTube videos. I mean, my great-grandpa worked 70 hours a week on his farm, or 80 or 90 hours a week, some weeks, I'm sure. I don't work 70 or 80, 90 hours a week, especially not in, horrific conditions out in the sun around machinery that might smash me any second, and with no doctor within 20 miles. I don't work in terrible, terrifying, life-threatening conditions like that. But I live a heck of a lot better than my great-grandpa. So what are we all going to do once we've automated everything around us? Go back to my grandpa's day and automate everything around him, which we did. We didn't just automate things, though. We made other things, like, for example, my great-grandpa never took an airplane flight because there weren't any airplanes around, or maybe they were invented in his lifetime. Now I can be a airline pilot, or, well, I don't have 20/20 vision, but I could be a mechanic. I could work for ISIS and go to Miami and try to disable the flight stuff on airplanes. You could be a flight mechanic now. You could be a flight mechanic 100 years ago. So it does definitely produce new jobs that weren't there before. It produces new ways of making a living. Now you can make a living by trying to connect the economy in California to the economy in Cincinnati or whatever, if you think there's a reasonable connection that can be made there. Maybe not through freight, but through moving personnel or information back and forth. You can connect these places now with an airplane, where before you'd have to take days or weeks to get stuff back and forth by train. So it creates whole new efficiencies. Now he's of course not addressing any of the stuff that Steph is actually saying, Steph Molyneux there. He's just straw-manning it.
You're having a lot more people put out of work. So your example of, or the example of, oh, okay, well, boo-hoo for the nail maker, he can go find another job. Furniture's got cheaper, more people are buying furniture now, and it's picked up the furniture market, so now a bunch of new jobs are opening up on the front.
He can go find a new job if he'll become more sophisticated so that he can benefit the people around him. Now, if he won't, if he insists on only using a hammer, society may not have a need for him. I mean, what if nobody wants to pay him to stand there and use a hammer all day to do something? What if the only people who want to employ him say, well, I'll employ you, but you have to learn how to use this machine I've got. You've got to learn to use this particular method I've invented, or that is being used now. What if that's the case? What if he has to learn in order to get another job? Are you okay with that? Isn't that an interesting side effect of a free economy? That it forces people to become more knowledgeable and educated? That's an interesting side effect, isn't it? Isn't that also an interesting side effect of fascism and communism? That people do not need to grow or learn or develop or become educated. They can stagnate. Isn't that the case? What do you think of that?
Which is not the case, especially with the ridiculous example he used of making tables $5 cheaper, or making furniture $5 cheaper, that's going to, cause this big influx of people buying stuff. So you have the out-of-work people, and you have the furniture industry who is also being automated.
Of course, is the problem. And this is a repetitive problem in thinking about the free market, talking about the free market. And it's really annoying, nails on a blackboard kind of problem, which is that the government subsidizes complaining and whining enormously. Enormously. Because you see, if you were a bunch of people who are thrown out of work because of automation, you normally, without a government being able to
all right, let's just cut that rant off before it even starts, because he's going to go into a rant about liberal, modern liberal democratic welfare states and victimization used by the liberals and the people that preach class warfare. So this has no relevance at all to automation, but once again, he's creating that false narrative. So
he's saying that when people get their jobs automated out of existence, instead of improving themselves, educating themselves, and finding a way that they could benefit other people in the economy, they just go to the government and cry, and the government does something about it, like ruins the economy even further than they had already been doing. That's his point there. Of course you don't want to address that because you're probably in favor of some sort of welfare state or something like that.
And you can see in this guy's thought process and how he's trying to set the stage for his fucking shitty little argument. Instead, what common sense is, hey, let's examine what automation is doing and what its effect is going to be on our future. Because mind you, we have a country of 300 million people. We have millions of people out of work now. We have millions of
We've got the lowest unemployment in our history.
People here with low-paying jobs. We have millions of people on welfare that need to be put back into the workforce.
A lot of them have been put back into the workforce. This is a very recent video. It's 2019.
All of these people are going to be affected by automation. And you can't take someone who was picking grapes and turn them into an IT tech. If you're going to say automation will create new jobs, well, you know, how does the grape picker become the IT tech while supporting his family while out of work at the same time and while also having to pay to school? So there's real human consequences to all these things going on.
Look at that population. There's our population. Where were we? About 1900? Less than 100 million people. We've automated virtually every job in existence in that year out of existence. Just about anything anybody did in the year 1900 is gone today. Almost everything. I mean, even acting in theaters. There are virtually no theaters left. Now everything's in the movies. So now you have to be a sophisticated actor and have knowledge about movies in order to be an actor. You can't just go up on the local stage in your local town and wait for the curtain to go up and speak your lines. You have to be sophisticated. Everything's gotten more sophisticated and knowledgeable. In order to do anything in our world today, you have to have more knowledge than you needed 100 years ago. That's just an interesting side effect of our economy, and of course some people don't like that.
And you see these people just because they want to dogmatically support their god, capitalism, and their church, the free market, that they try to dismiss anyone who would think the other way or bring up an argument against it by trying to attach this to liberal welfare, victimization, class warfare, Marxism type mentality.
Yeah, we're pretty against everybody who argues against our position because the people who argue against our position are in favor of something like North Korea or Venezuela or Cuba or Nazi Germany or Soviet Russia, some sort of economic wreck. So, as I've said before, I'll say again, freedom does not mean that everything's perfect and everybody's happy. Freedom just means that everybody's free to do as they please, as long as they don't hurt other people. That's all it means. And it turns out that that's best. That's the best system that we've found. That's possible. There's no other system that's possibly better than the system where people decide for themselves what's best for themselves. The only way to improve that system is to improve the people deciding. Make sure they're actually making good decisions or better decisions. So we shall improve the philosophy of society if we want to improve society.
If you dare say, hold on, let's just pump the brakes a little bit on this automation. Let's slow this down. We don't know where automation is taking us. So
you're saying let's slow down wealth creation. Let's not create so much wealth so fast. It scares me. That's what you're saying.
People who are complaining about being thrown out of work, you think it's a disaster. And of course, all of the people who have jobs because the price of nails went down, right? The people who sell more furniture, right? They don't know that they're expanding their workforce to sell more furniture because as the price of furniture goes down, people buy more of it. They don't know that. Everybody who's hired doesn't know it's because the price of nails went down. So you've got this concentrated group of subsidized whiners, and then you have this diffuse group of people who benefit who can't even trace back directly where the benefits came from or what.
The diffuse, that's a good way to put it. There's the seen and the unseen, as Frederick Bastiat says. And what you can see is the nail workers who are out of work. What you cannot see is all the furniture boys across the country. Only one in this city and one in that city, not a lot. But what you can't see is all the extra money in the pockets of the furniture sellers and stuff. That's what you can't see. It's distributed.
But this is why you need principles, not personal stories, when you're making decisions about society.
Yes, principles. Let's look at those principles. I guess as a nationalist, my principles differ from that of an individualist and a globalist. I mean, let's face it, if you're free market, you're a globalist. I don't care what you call yourself. When I look at it, my principles...
That's fallacy. I'm a nationalist for the United States of America, and I'm in favor of free trade because it's better for everybody, especially for the free people. Free trade's most beneficial for the free people. We shouldn't trade, of course, with our enemies. I think that's insane that we're trading with China, for example. I've always been very suspicious of our trade with communist China. I bought into it for a long time, you know, oh, they're not communists, they're changing. You know, the Berlin Wall fell, Soviet Union fell apart, and China changed. China decided to go to free markets. China became capitalist, right? I bought into that narrative for a long time. Now I do not. I think China's communist. I think that the people who offered us free trade with China were just trying to make billions of dollars, and they didn't care that we were equipping a potentially lethal communist state with all kinds of technology. Now, of course, we wake up and find that that is what has happened.
Matters to me. I mean, let's take the hypothetical case of the nail workers out of work, but the furniture industry picked up a little bit, so more jobs were there for furniture people. Well, this is the dog-eat-dog mentality of capitalism. This is the rot that eats away at the inner soul of an...
No, it's not dog-eat-dog. It's the more sophisticated take away from the less sophisticated. And here's one way that that happens. You got some little corner grocery store, and it's just fine, and people will keep coming there, and they'll keep buying groceries from you. But the problem is, somebody who's got millions of dollars wants to make money somehow, and they are driving through your little town, and they say, my goodness, I'll bet if we put up a nice big new modern grocery store, we could get a bunch of business here, because look, all they've got here is this little old grocery store. So they come in and they spend millions of dollars building a brand new great big grocery store, and sure enough, sooner or later, you and your little grocery store out of business. And so what has happened there? A perfectly good little establishment went out of business because somebody was willing to spend money making something that the consumer wanted more. Now, did the consumer need that? No. So here's this weird thing that happens in the capitalist economy. Perfectly good businesses and resources are turned redundant again and again and again. There you had two grocery stores, a little old-fashioned one that was doing its job, and here comes a new one, puts the little old-fashioned one out of business because the little one was redundant now, not needed. So the guy who was making money in his little store now is jobless, and a bunch of minimum wage workers are running the grocery store over there for some fat cat millionaire. And the people of the town now have a nice big modern grocery store where they used to have this little dinky old-fashioned thing. That's what happens in our society because people want the big modern grocery stores. So in freedom, in a free country, you do get what people want, and people want things cheaper, people want things better, they want more of them, and they want them more readily available. People want to live a better life, and that's what happens in a capitalist system. People live better lives.
Because, yes, now my neighbor, who may be a nail worker, or the guy down the block even, who may be a nail worker, a nail producer, he's out of work. But you know what? I'm happy, because now there's more work for my furniture company that I work for. There's more job security for me now. So be happy. Oh, don't worry about these complainers, as he would call them, subsidized complainers. Don't worry about them. They're getting pushed out by automation. And on top of that, just like as the old saying go, when they're talking about the Nazis, first they came for the Jews, and they came for the Catholics, etc. Whatever. You know the saying goes. Then They came for me, but there was no one there to listen. Well, same with automation, right? So the furniture worker's laughing at the nail worker, like he doesn't give a fuck about the nail worker because his industry is doing swell right now. But guess what? Automation's coming for your job too. And earlier we went through a list, little video clips of top 10 in the near future jobs that automation will replace. There's countless amount of jobs that are going to be replaced with automation, especially at the rate technology is going now. And there's a mass sum of human people in this American country right now, and a very divided people through politics, ethnicity, income, and to think because people are cautious about mass automation going on, replacing a mass amount of jobs when we already A, have a welfare state, B, have a large influx of illegal immigrant workers, and C, have a working class that have been stagnant for the past 60 years. Yeah, it's valid to question these things. It's these dogmatic defenses of the free market is ridiculous and has already gotten us into the situation we're in now. I mean, you want to go back to free markets and complete pure capitalism? Well, this is exactly what you'll get again throughout its process. This is the outcome of that. Because money became power, and because money was concentrated by a small number of banking interest and corporate interest, the system has given way. The free market has given way to its own monopoly. It's essentially the snake that eats itself.
And so people say, well,
I wonder what, I really do wonder what sort of system he has in mind as an alternative. I mean, the United States, as bad as it is better than any other country on the planet. And as poor as our poorest people are, they're all fat, and they all have jobs available to them. And if they get together, 2 of them can get an apartment with minimum wage jobs. So it's not really that bad. I mean, it's so much worse everywhere else in the world. Even Europe plays second fiddle to the United States. I wouldn't move to Europe for anything. And the people who move there tell me that it's not as good as all that. It's a second world country. The whole damn place. Britain, France, Sweden, Netherlands, Germany. Second world country compared to the United States. What is so bad in the United States? I don't see what's so bad. We're all rich as can be, working less than we had ought to, and getting paid more than we should. I wonder what kind of system he proposes.
people are thrown out of work. Like, it's a bad thing. It's a great thing that people are thrown out of work. It's, you know, when public executions were banned, well, public executioners didn't have a job anymore.
One of the beautiful things about our economy, ladies and gentlemen, is that people can be thrown out of work. And the government can just screw off while the economy adjusts itself. For example, everybody wanted a Model T. So there was a huge influx of people to the cities that built the cars, and plants were opened, and thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of jobs were added to the economy. And 5 years later, when the Model T went out of production and newer, better cars were being made, and you didn't have to buy a new car every year, then all of a sudden cars are lasting 2 or 3 years. Very, very few cars are needed compared to the numbers they used to. And the plants lay off huge numbers of people. And in the United States of America, we can do that. Because we wanted cars, we got the cars, we improved the cars. The people who had jobs making crappy cars some of them were able to work on the more sophisticated models that were coming out, but some of them couldn't. Not all those jobs were needed. So what are they going to do? Well, in a free economy, in a free country, they had the freedom to come up here, come up to Detroit, you know, from the South, which is where a lot of them came from. They had the freedom to come up and work those jobs. So it's not that the free economy should be blamed that they eventually lost the jobs. Free economy should be given credit that the jobs ever existed to begin with. And by the time those jobs had to move on, there were other jobs available. Well, maybe not in the 1930s, but that was a government-enforced period of poverty. The 1930s was not an economic crash. It was a period of economic fascism. Poverty enforced by the government with 95% tax rates on the rich. That's what was going on in the Great Depression. Government-enforced poverty.
terrible. You know, when the Nazi concentration camps were liberated, the Nazi guards were thrown out of work, and it's like, so, you know, unemployment is not an evil, and employment is not necessarily a good. Now, you can, of course, guarantee full employment. So you can guarantee full employment very easily. You can do it in one stroke of a legislative pen. Ban all farm machinery. No more threshers, combine harvesters, you name it, right? None of the things that bind up hay or whatever it is in those weird little circular balls of twine that you see out in the countryside. I'm not a farmer, as you can tell. So you ban all farm machinery. Ban trucks, ban trains. People have to carry goods on a burro, an ass, or a donkey, or on their heads for that matter, and look at that. We have full employment. But nobody...
So once again, he's ridiculing anyone who takes a stance different from his own. He goes right to that extreme. So if we look at the problem and the future of automation and want to see how it's going to affect our nation and how we can work with it, even if you want to discuss that, he's already painting you in a corner with this extreme, oh, we want to tear everything down, we want to be like Amish people, we want to stop all automation. And when in reality, we probably do need to pull back on some of it. Maybe that is a strategic move that's going to benefit the country better. But hell, people like that aren't going to be up for it when they're trying to paint you, once again, that false narrative, putting you in that corner, mocking you again, just like his free market IQ.
Now see this guy, the cultured, what is he, the cultured what? Thug? Cultured thug? He doesn't have any principles here. He doesn't have any understanding of what the economy is or what labor-saving devices are. He doesn't have any principles to view this on. So he says maybe we do need to pull back on some of that stuff. So he's willing to look at a case-by-case basis. Should we undo this? Should we, maybe it's a good idea to have more people working in the fields. Maybe we should illegalize threshing machines. Hell, maybe that's a good idea. He'll look at it on a case-to-case basis. And he'll design his country higgledy-piggledy, top-down, like the communist dictators. Yeah, that's the principle he's going on.
Believe in a free market, you must be dumb, you must have a low IQ. Same with this. Oh, if you're hesitant towards automation, you want to be Amish.
People being thrown out of work is how you know the economy is progressing. Like if you look at the Middle Ages, you had the strangulation economy where no innovation was basically allowed because the guilds and the state was so powerful in...
Yes. He says, say what? Yes, it's true that when people are being thrown out of work, the economy is progressing. That is a reorganization. A recession is a reorganization. When there's a boom, everything's going fine, but the problem is when there's a boom, there are some people that are undergoing some projects which are actually not sustainable. 6 months or a year down the road when activity drops off, some of these projects are not going to be able to make money. There are some people who are too high of debt and the economy's booming and they see a big chance to make money, so they put all their eggs in one basket and they go for it. And if the economy stays booming, maybe they make it, but if the economy turns, then they don't. And so what happens is when the economy turns, these people who are at the razor's edge, they have got too much debt, their idea is not good enough, they've spent too much getting into the thing and they have to charge too much to make their idea work, or they're using old-fashioned technology that's not up to par and people don't want the product. These are the ones that go out of business when the economy turns. And all of a sudden these machines that were being used by some company that did not have its eggs in order, did not have its ducks in order, those machines will now be sold to some other company or they will be set silent. And companies that had a better working apparatus and lower costs and were more efficient and are able to offer a better price, those companies will get the business that these wily, on-the-edge companies cannot provide anymore because they've gone out of business when the economy tanks a little bit. Now, what happens to all the resources of all these companies? They say, oh my goodness, this company's gone out of business. But it didn't really disappear, did it? Its line of credit at the local bank is now available to somebody else. The bank has more money to loan out to somebody else instead of this company. The workers in this company are now available for the rest of the economy, making labor more available for other projects elsewhere in the economy. The resources that were being used by this company, apparently inefficiently, are now available to other companies. So here's some steel plant down the road now, and it's now calling customers saying, hey, we've got a whole bunch of extra steel beams. What if we gave you a 20% discount? Could you take some extra steel beams this week? And so they're now, all of a sudden, there is more resources available for maybe a lower price to the rest of the economy when this company goes out of business. So when an economy turns down, when a recession hits, there is a readjustment. The oldest and the sickest and the weakest die, but they don't evaporate. They fall on the forest floor, and they become the detritus for the next, generation. If it's a forest we're talking about, then it's the oldest elephant that dies, and its carcass gets eaten up. Or it's an old emaciated deer or bear or fox, and it lays down and dies, and along come, whatever it is to eat its carcass and turn it back into more resources for the next cycle. That's just exactly how a company is in a recession. Yeah, it's a good thing. It's a readjustment of badly allocated resources.
People's creativity, which meant you basically didn't have your own property rights. And in the Middle Ages, yeah, pretty much everyone had a job. But it was a horrifying environment. How do you know he's a king? He hasn't got shit all over.
So once again, with this extreme leap, which, as you can see just in this 10-minute video, it's repetitive over and over again. So questioning automation is essentially wanting to return to feudal society.
This idea that automation creates unemployment, price of nails goes down, price of assembling things goes down, you end up with cheaper houses. Right? You get cheaper houses, well, absent mass immigration, of course. You end up with cheaper houses. When houses are cheaper, people spend less money on mortgages, they spend less money on rent, so they have more money to spend on other things. It's really not that complicated. Automation drives down the price of things. It can increase demand, which may mean even the same people can stay in the job, drives down the prices of things, people have more money to spend on other stuff, creates more work. Lickety-boom, all done now.
Lickety-boom, all done. Just that simple. We wrapped it all up. Any concerns with automation have been wrapped up in that 10-minute video.
Any concerns with automation have been wrapped up when you look at Hong Kong or the United States versus Soviet Russia or Venezuela or Communist China. Or look at Communist China today versus 30 years ago. Did automation take away jobs in China?
And especially at the last 30 seconds of the video, where he says, brings down prices, creates more work, gives more money for people to spend. But when we see, once again, the average household income, that doesn't pan out. That's not true. And then when we also see the number of unemployed people, the number of people out there seeking work and people actually sitting on welfare, and then all the undocumented people on top of that, and with many more jobs on the chopping block in the future thanks to automation, we definitely have an issue with that. As far as the claim of...
one interesting thing that I've seen in our economy is all this distribution, all these distribution warehouses. And that's kind of an interesting thing, that so many Americans are working just delivering goods to people. And I guess the reason for that is because they're not necessarily needed in the production of the goods, partly because it's happening in China, but partly because the goods that are produced require so little human intervention. So that leaves more time for us to consume them, and more people are needed to distribute because more goods are being distributed. So there's a boom in the warehousing and distribution sector of our economy. Now, would he want to do away with that? Would he want to stop that growth? That growth comes from the fact that we have so many automated factories producing so much stuff so cheap that people can buy massive amounts of stuff. So, wow, very, very soft ground he stands on. And his only statement so far is a statement exactly opposite of any principle. His only statement so far is that we would have to see. There might be some things. There could be some adjustments. Maybe that's something we could look at. No, you don't want to do away with innovation and automation, do you? No, you're just worried that it's destroying jobs. Innovation and automation is okay as long as it doesn't destroy jobs, right? He would only allow innovation and automation that didn't destroy jobs. Well, I got news for you. Every single innovation or automation is going to make some sort of adjustment that you're probably not going to like. So you are going to work towards a very stagnant society where you have 40,000 automobiles being manufactured every year, and you won't increase that amount because you don't want to take away from rickshaw drivers because they can't afford automobiles. So if you had 80,000 automobiles being produced, then there would be more taxi cabs, and all these rickshaw drivers would be out of work. So we keep automobiles at 40,000 per year like India did for decades, so that they have more rickshaw drivers employed. Is that the kind of economy you want? A real sophisticated economy? No, less sophistication, more humanity, right? He wants the humane element.
On the price of houses, I'm not quite sure that's completely accurate. So let's look at how true that analogy is here with the housing prices going down thanks to automation. Well, we can definitely all agree since 1940, automation has definitely improved a lot. And we can all agree that it's going to improve a lot more within the next 10 to 20 years. And we see the housing prices here. Alabama, the average price was $16,800 for a house. Today, or in 2000, Alabama was $85,000. So we see there's quite a difference.
Peter Thiel, by the way, I have to mention this. Peter Thiel says that we have not really automated as much as everybody says, or as everybody thought we were going to 10 and 20 years ago. And he thinks maybe this is some sort of propaganda to push a narrative or something, or a mistaken belief for sure. But that we do not have the highly automated economy everyone said 10, 20 years ago we were going to have. And he thinks 10 and 20 years from now we'll probably be in the same place we are today, talking about this future in which everything's going to be automated, and we still won't be there. Now, I'm in a little bit of disagreement with him. I think that we are already extremely, very highly automated. So I don't know exactly what view he comes from, but that is what he said in the interview with Eric Weinstein on the Portal.
Your theory is not holding up true. And then we have $78 here for District of Columbia, or 78,000. District of Columbia, 157,000. Nevada, 20,000 in 1940s, up to 142,000 in 2000. So we see the trend in reality doesn't support the claim, which shouldn't come as no surprise because
I don't know what he just analyzed there, but it was really weak.
even if it's cheaper to make something now, I mean, what's the capitalist overall goal? To make capital. Capitalism is all about pursuing capital. That's its main initiative. So even if they can make houses for cheaper or furniture for cheaper, do you really think they're going to knock off exactly how much cheaper they have to get it now to the consuming customer as well?
Well, the beautiful thing about capitalism is that you can't just set up a grocery store and make money on it forever. Somebody's going to come along and build a nicer grocery store across the street. So if some capitalist sets up some way to make money, say, look at these shovels over here on the right hand side. Some capitalist sets up a way to make shovels, and he's sitting there making shovels and he's doing pretty good. And somebody else comes along and they make a fiberglass shovel, and the handle is much, much stronger, and they sell it for $10 less. And farmers start buying those because they hear from their friend who bought one that they never break, they last forever, and they're really good. And so all of a sudden, this company, which according to you is it some greedy fat capitalist who's just making money and he's just going to keep on making money, now somebody else is eating his dinner. So he has to figure out a way to make his wooden-handled shovels cost less so they can compete with the new fiberglass-handled shovels that are stronger and better and last longer. So there's always one capitalist looking to eat another capitalist's lunch. It's not like they're all just in a group. Now, to some extent, today they have hijacked the government and they all are just in a group, in a gang, taking our tax money and giving it to themselves. But you're not going to be able to fix that problem by running away from capitalism. You're only going to be able to fix that problem by going towards more capitalism and getting away from government graft and government interference in the economy.
No, of course not. because it's about making profit. That's goal number one. And as low as they can get it, where it's still high enough to where they can make profit, where they can get you to buy it, is as low as they're willing to go.
And let's say they go as low as they're willing to go. Then there's some other millionaire standing there looking at it, trying to figure out what he can do to get the price still lower so he can build a factory or a store and take that guy's lunch. So there's always somebody, even if there's already all the needs are met, there's some millionaire there somewhere that's going to want to meet those needs a little bit better. Just build a slightly better car, or make a little bit better of a garden hose or a mousetrap. Always, always. That's what capitalism is. Whatever somebody makes, it's going to become the moving target for the next guy.
But it's always about that profit. It's simply about money, and there's nothing deeper than that.
Well, what is money? Are you sure there's nothing deeper than money there? Because money is productivity. Productivity is wealth. Wealth is well-being. I mean, money is well-being. More money makes people live better. So, is there nothing deeper than living better? No, I don't think that there is anything deeper than living better. Would you rather die a very meaningful death at 25 or live a sort of existential crisis until you're 70? I think I would rather try to figure out the meaning of life and bungle along till I'm 70 than have a very meaningful existence and die when I'm 25. I don't, there's no choice there for me.
In that sense, capitalism and communism have that in common. They are both materialistic, political, social, economic philosophies. So we see just on this topic of automation, diving into the mind.
There we go. The guy is so stupid that he equates capitalism and communism as materialistic. He puts capitalism and communism on one side and his idea of a humane society on the other. That's how stupid he is. He is a communist, and he thinks the communists are against his position. That's how illiterate this guy is.
Capitalist. We see it's very material, it's very what's on the paper is what matters. It's very what affects me personally matters. There is no connection to a collective, to a group, to extended family, to a nation. There is no concern unless it...
I'll tell you where there's no connection to a collective, a state, a family. There's no concern for others. I'll tell you where that happens. That happens in North Korea, where people starve to death on the street and nobody does anything about it because everybody's out for themselves. That happens in Soviet Russia, where, oh, well, of course I'm giving examples of communism here, and he's not a communist. But we could also use Nazi Germany for that, couldn't we?
Physically or economically affects...
Whereas in the United States, or in a capitalist country, poor people have soup kitchens, they have government welfare that's handed out, which shouldn't be. But even if they didn't, back before government welfare, there were church charities that they could go to. There were soup kitchens, and there were less starving people. There's never been a famine in the United States. With all the poor people, even during the Depression, there's never been a famine. In fact, I'll drop this little tidbit in here, ladies and gentlemen. Did you know that your beef at the local grocery store is brought to you at no cost? Did you know that you purchase that beef at cost? I asked my dad about this once. I says, why don't we open a restaurant and we'll slaughter the cows ourselves, and then we won't have to pay retail price for beef. We can pay off the farm price. And my dad said it wouldn't work, we wouldn't make any money on it because beef is actually purchased at price at the store. What the butchers make their money on is the bones and the hide and the hair and the teeth and the whatever else. They take all the stuff, the blood, all the stuff besides the meat, and they sell that stuff. And they sell the meat at cost because they can't get it any higher. They really can't charge very much for it, because if they charged any more for it, somebody else would sell it at cost because they are making the money off of the hides and the bones. So you get your meat, when you buy meat for $2.99 a pound at grocery store, you need to realize that it costs approximately that much to put it on the shelf. Very little money is being made on that. Did you know that? Now find me that happening in a non-capitalist society where meat is sold at cost to the people. If somebody tried to sell it higher than at cost, people wouldn't buy it because there's another package of meat right in the next store over that's less. People, they make their money on the bones and the hides. Did you know that?
Themselves. And so any topic they speak on, automation, healthcare, education, immigration, it's all going to come from that perspective from them. And if they attach something to their beloved free market, like in this in this instance, automation, then they will dogmatically and blindly support automation, as you've seen throughout this video, as he set up points to ridicule, attack anyone who would take a different position, suggest their intelligence would be low, etc., and attach false narratives to anyone with a differing opinion. So they can attack these extreme false narratives. All the meanwhile, explaining everything through the process of the material buy and sell. And this is what's good or bad. This is how society determines if it's good or bad. If you can buy something for cheaper and there's more of it, that must mean it's good. That's good for society, to be able to buy more shit. Completely detached from the human element, which should be...
So what would his answer be? To buy less shit? Because now you guys have probably heard me talk about the cheap garbage we have from communist China. That's for sure. But I think that we should have been able to buy our cheap shit from an ally instead of an enemy. Like, you know, Taiwan or Hong Kong, maybe not Hong Kong anymore. Singapore, India. Why don't we build some factories in India if we want cheap labor, for God's sakes? Why do we have to give money to the communists? But yeah, I'm afraid that in a free country, what we're going to have is people doing whatever they want. People doing free things is going to upset all the fascists. I know. There's going to be strip clubs, and there's going to be people that never leave their house, and there's going to be atheists. I mean, there's going to be all manner of unsavory things going on in a free economy. Sorry.
Because capitalism itself ignores the reality of human nature. Well, at least its supporters ignore the reality of human nature as they try to
work, buy, consume, die. Well, communism and fascism just cut two of these out. You don't get to consume anything, and you don't get to buy anything. You just work and or die. Some people don't even get to work, they just die.
Capitalism up as some virtuous, beautiful system, when in reality...
And I would replace work with benefit others. Take what you've made from benefiting others, buy something, consume it, and then die. That's what I would say. Replace work with benefit others, because that's what really happens in a free economy. You don't just work. I mean, if work were it, then you could just go out and dig a ditch. And it wouldn't even matter if the ditch went to any place or from any place. It wouldn't matter if it ever carried water. You'd just dig a ditch. That's work, right? No. Benefiting others is what it's all about. That's what happens in a free economy. Not necessarily in a socialist economy. Then you'd actually do just work, and you might be working on things like tanks for the army to help suppress you.
Succeeds best when it feeds on its fellow man, when it feeds on the lower instincts of man. It is a whole functional system set up on picking at the low-hanging fruit. So to sum it up, in the mind of the capitalist,
if capitalism picks the low-hanging fruit, what's the high-hanging fruit? It seems to me capitalism picks the fruit. Everybody else just starves to death. That's what it looks like to me.
Automation is great because you're going to get more stuff cheaper, allegedly. If it puts people out of work, don't worry. They'll either get with it one way or another, or some new technology will come around that creates new jobs. It's their constant...
No, the technology that innovated creates new jobs. By making more resources and more labor available, new jobs are created. It's It's not that maybe some other technology will come along. That technology itself creates more wealth and more jobs thereby.
Hope and faith that technology can keep up with man's problems of today. On the bright side, it seems we are in the last era of capitalism in America. It is definitely on its way out. No more clearer could the example be shown as in the last presidential election, when you had two wildly popular candidates in Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders, both having the non-classical capitalist, conservative, libertarian message. Trump with more of a nationalistic economy, and Bernie Sanders more with the welfare state economy.
How is Bernie Sanders anything libertarian? What an idiot is this guy. Good God.
The majority of Americans pit these two men over the rest of the politicians, over the fiscal conservative, the free market conservative, the libertarian. Capitalism's time has come and gone. It was fun. We all got fat. We got cancer. We got diabetes. It was a blast. It's time to move on. The only question that is now to be answered is, what do we move on to? Will it be a
move on to some other system where people don't get fat all the time, right? What kind of system would that be? That sounds scary to me.
Ethical, true third position that takes the positive aspects of individualism and collectivism and combines them while discarding the negative
What were the positive aspects of collectivism? I missed those.
elements? Or will it be the liberal, welfare, egalitarian, transnational state? The libertarian, the individualist, the conservative, they are going the way of the dinosaur. And although they may...
No, you socialists are going the way of the dinosaur, you numbskull. So what, answer my question. Answer my question I just asked.
They may come kicking and screaming into a more nationalist thought. They are just delaying the inevitable. We no longer can afford the luxury of being an individual. They will eventually be there because there is no other option besides a reactionary, nationalist,
You can't afford the luxury of being individual. It's like saying you can't afford the luxury of having wealth. We can't afford to have wealth. We don't have enough wealth to have wealth. That's just an idiotic statement. Individualism is what creates wealth. If you can afford anything at all, you can afford it because you've had individualism. Even Soviet Russia knew that. They had the new economic plan in the 1920s so they could create wealth, so they could then redistribute it.
revolutionary.
And throughout the Soviet Union, everybody always had a little plot of land next to their dacha or their cottage or their home, where 85 or 90% of the national food was grown in these little teeny private plots. And all the farmland, which was 85 or 90% of the farmland in the country, grew 10 or 15% of the food. Pathetic. So that shows you how productive individualism is.
Populist movement, or the neoliberals, the cultural Marxists, the international finance lackeys, the pseudo-socialists, the parliamentary socialists, the welfare state socialists. They already have a huge head start with domination in the media, in the public educational system, in pop culture, in finance, in organization. They already have a huge head start. And the separated, divided, dog-eat-dog, if it's good for me, fuck everyone else, capitalist mentality, it's not a functional mentality, to survive on as a nation in any long term, unless you judge the survival of a nation by how cheap you can buy shit, which apparently a lot of capitalists do. But if your concept of a nation...
Not only how cheap you can buy it, but how good it is. Things get better over time if you have a free economy. Right? Compare a phone in the 1970s to a phone today. Maybe light bulbs haven't gotten better, but that's because of government intervention, isn't it? But things get better over time, not just cheaper and more available, but better too.
Citizenry, of a culture, of a race, of an ethnicity, if it goes deeper than mere material numbers, then it should be clearly seen that it is a failed system. And the only thing that could stop the coming leftist insurrection is a unified, reactionary...
The coming leftist insurrection? We're seeing a rightist insurrection all around us. We're seeing fake news being taken absolutely unseriously. We're seeing the colleges and universities are falling apart and switching and destroying themselves, and enrollment is dropping. No, we're seeing the rise of the right coming leftist insurrection. Unless he means the fake news trying to take over, and Hillary Clinton trying to take over and Barack Obama's dirty deeds. Is that what he means? Coming leftist insurrection. The left is on its last legs. It's on its heels. It's fighting. It's fighting back. It's on the defensive. It's being attacked on all fronts. People are leaving the left in mass. There's black exit. There's leave the Democrat. There's walk away. What does he mean, the coming leftist insurrection? Unless he means that they're going to get desperate and try something violent. What does he mean, the coming leftist insurrection?
Revolutionary, political, nationalist, populist party. Only through unity are we going to be able to find victory.
Unity. Who has unity? Who has unity, ladies and gentlemen? Does the United States have unity? Or does who has unity? The United States has unity. Where's he going to get unity from? Free people are united in the defense
From the magazine,
of their freedom.
Der Angriff.
Free people are united in their defense of freedom. I don't know why it went to that. That must be the guy's next video. This guy's a nutbag. All right, thank you for joining me. If you appreciate what I do, please Patreonize. If you don't appreciate what I do,
truly has a perverse.
if you don't appreciate what I do, I don't know why you watched all the way to the end of this video. So if you did watch all the way to the end, you probably ought to go throw me $5 or $10 a month on Patreon and encourage my making more of these.